I'd like to call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, June 11th meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everyone. Start with roll call.
Carey? Here. Walton?
Here.
Stephenson?
Here.
Schlotthauer?
Here.
Hempy? Here. Wilhelm?
Here.
All right. Just a reminder, I think most of you guys are already doing it. We have a public hearing tonight. As you guys are already probably doing, fill out the paperwork, bring that up front to Nancy, and then we'll take care of that during the public hearing portion of the meeting. Next item on the agenda is ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentations.
Yeah, so today actually is National German Chocolate Cake Day. So as you guys noticed when you guys got here, the planning department did offer you guys some cake to a part of thanking you guys for volunteering on this commission, and we appreciate it. So kind of a double edge there.
I tried it. It was delicious. Nice job.
All right.
Nice. All right. Do we have any amendments to the agenda tonight?
There is actually item number 8 on the agenda, the Development Impact Fee Committee meeting. That is not going to be going on this evening. So we will be moving it's actually an impact fee report. We'll be moving that report to another meeting in the future.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Can we go over the consent calendar, please?
Yeah, so action item A is the meeting minutes from May 14th, 2024, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Action item B is the MVBC zone recommendation, file number ANNX 236.
Okay. Commission members, you guys get a chance to look at that. Any questions?
No.
There's no questions. Would someone like to make a motion?
Move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I second.
And a second. Can I have roll call, please?
Wilhelm?
Yes.
Hempy?
Yes.
Schlotthauer?
Yes.
Stephenson?
Yes.
Walton?
Yes.
Carey? Yes.
All right. Next item is citizen issues, and this section of the agenda is for citizens wishing to speak to the commission on items that are not on the agenda tonight. Do we have anybody that wants to speak on something that is not on the agenda tonight? All right, seeing none, we'll move right along. Any unfinished or old business?
There's none.
All right. Next item is public hearings. Our one and only hearing tonight is the North Place Subdivision, file number SUBD 2307. And we'll open that hearing.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager, here to present the North Place East 2024 preliminary plat proposal. The owner of the property is Schneimiller Brothers, Inc. The applicant is Kevin Schneimiller, who is here this evening. They are requesting to subdivide approximately 238 and some change acres into an approximate 1,125 lots within the residential mix zoning district. It is planned to be in multiple phases and to be consistent with the associated development agreement that was tied to a zone change request a few years back. Here's a location of the project you see in hatched in red, east of Idaho, south of Prairie, and just a bit west of Greens Ferry. So there it is there. The current land use on that is it's a large undeveloped lot. It's intended for future phases of development, zoned at residential mixed. The water provider is west of Syringa would be the city of Post Falls, and you'll see Syringa coming up. East of Syringa would be Ross Point Water District, with the city of Post Falls providing the sanitary sewer. Looking at the surrounding zoning of the area, you can see that the area that is to the west and south is zoned single-family residential. That's that typical R1 zone properties. I did get a call that did inquire upon some of the other uses that are in the R1. The way things had been done prior to the mid-2015s is people would do a PUD, and then that allowed them to do other uses in those with some density trade-offs. Usually they would get some density trade-offs and do some open in exchange for some open space. So Fieldstone to the south, that there, even though it's yellow, there's a park there at that location. They do have some, if you're familiar with Fieldstone, they do have some linear trails and connecting multi-use trails of that. You do have on this section right here some multi-family going on at that location, and then there's a school right there at Greens Ferry Elementary. You also have to the west the golf course. To the north of the proposed site, you do have egg zone properties that are in the county. And to the east, you have other single-family residential development, as well as some mixed commercial to the northeast of this proposed project location. Looking at the proposed subdivision plan, this is their proposed concept. You do have Penrose, which is the major east-west road going through the project, about like this route there. You do have a north-south Seranga dividing the project more or less in half. When I was referencing the water service provider, so the west side is the City of Post Falls, with the east side being Ross Point Water District. There'd been some questions regarding what is going where on this, and so generally speaking, we do have a bubble map, which I'm about to show, which kind of governs the uses of this site. But generally speaking, from what I understand, is the idea at this point in time is where you see these larger lots along the east side of that proposed park location, which is right here, that is intended to be some smaller scale neighborhood commercial type uses. At this location, where you see these larger lots, the general intent at this point in time is to do some, I believe, some multifamily at that location. I believe 55 and older. The applicant can add some more clarifications on that. And these larger lots here are some additional proposed multifamily at that location. The development agreement did cap that, though, to a 2-story height max on that multifamily. Right here within the submittal, you can kind of see here, these are some typical lot sizes that are being proposed. That's kind of hard to read as submitted. So what I tried to do is make it a little more legible by zooming in that legend. So they intend to do, and part of the residential mix is, the intent is to have diversified housing products within a development. So that's why you see here front entry detached. Lots can range in width from 50 to 70 with a depth between 100 to 160. That allows that flexibility for that kind of product. Front entry attached, so that would be more or less like you could have a twin home, which is a townhome, but you only have 2 units with 1 common wall potentially for a front entry attached. And you'd see there the lot depths being about 100 to 160 feet. Rear entry, that oftentimes is you would have like an alley that would provide access to a residential product that would front usually a street that would have some degree of parking on it at times. So here you would have rear entry detached product, typical lots there, 35 to 60 feet wide. That allows, sometimes you may have a larger side yard than others. Your housing product might be a little wider, or you may have some skinnier products. So that's the intent of that. And then you have the lot depth between 90 to 120 feet there. Their proposed rear entry attached was between 20 to 50 feet wide. Once again, you could have the twin home, that duplex type product that you're going to have, or some attached wall product, a townhome. That's where that 20 foot comes in. And then you have that ranging lot depth of 80 to 120 feet. The multifamily, you see the varying lot size there being proposed at that location. The city staff did look at their proposed lots against the residential mixed, as well as other conditions to where we do require some pedestrian trail connections if block lengths get over a certain length, and staff did find that their proposed pedestrian connection did meet the intent of that development agreement when it comes to providing those pedestrian mid-block connections. Here is the regulating plan on the site. Here's what the regulating plan more or less says, that in these bubble maps, generally, that's the intent of the bubble, is you more or less would stick those uses in those locations. And so up here you see some multifamily, single family, and attached. And I believe this is why the applicant on the larger lots placed those larger lots at that location, is to put that in a similar location as approved in that regulating plan. Similarly, over here, you see the multifamily product at that location. More or less, staff viewed this as being consistent with that regulating plan, with that zone change, as intending to meet the purpose of that. Areas for other types of multifamily and neighborhood commercial, you see, I couldn't, because of the smaller areas, fit all the language. That's why I did put some acronym references on these, but you see NC being your neighborhood commercial, a single family attached, single family detached, and multifamily potentially could have been there at this point in time. You see here a proposed platting at those locations. I will note, because it's residential mixed, and the purpose of this preliminary plat is to allow this to flex and morph through time such that it stays consistent with this development agreement. It would have that flexibility, but generally speaking, this preliminary plat is the concept. The actual layout and lot size, as you see here in this note, there may be at times the proposed lots may differ from the prescribed typical lot size. So they may at times change things, but that change would be governed to this regulating plan as the extent to which things can change without being considered a major amendment. Any questions on that from the commission?
No.
I do have one quick question.
Okay.
In changing on that, how much could they change? I mean, they're not locked into anything at this
They're
point?
locked into, in this area, they really, all they could do is single-family attached and single-family detached, generally speaking, within a relative reasonable extent of that bubble area. You go over here, this zone here, all they could do is single-family attached and single-family detached in that, generally speaking. And that would stay true with this area. Only in the areas that have additional uses that are along Syringa, and the reason why they're there is because Syringa is going to be a north-south street, which when Rob gets up here, he can talk about that road classification of Syringa. When you get to your more intense or higher classified roads, they generally, that's where you stick those uses to funnel them in and out of a development quicker than otherwise.
So technically, if they wanted to change, like up there at the top left corner, single family, attached or detached, they could have either, or they could have all being one, right?
Yeah, they could do the whole thing being single-family detached.
Same in any of those locations, so if they wanted, they could change the whole, practically the whole thing to be single family attached if they wanted, or is there something that would-
Potentially, they would have to be governed by what they're saying here, these typical lot sizes. So, they'd be going by more or less this or consistent with the residential mixed zone.
Commissioner, may I jump in?
Yep.
Yeah,
Let me clarify. In the residential mixed zone, there are some limitations on the uses of the sites. For neighborhood commercial, cannot exceed 10% of the total development area, and I believe the multifamily residential uses cannot exceed 20% of the total area.
Okay.
So for the entire property.
But for the attached and detached houses, there's no such,
I'm not aware of any
Percentage.
other limitations.
We see it as being single-family, so it's a single-family residence. The financing for a single-family attached is no different than a single-family detached. You own the land, you own your unit, you do have a common law. Building code regulates.
so is this more like a condo or cottage home?
Single-family attached would more or less be either in the form
Duplex.
of a townhome.
Townhome.
Could be in a form of 2 units or more with the limitations of a shared wall. So you would be that single family attached.
Okay. Thank you.
And then all this is governed by this plan, the development agreement, so as this starts getting built out, the city knows what's going on and can look back at the development agreement and say, yep, this is in accordance with the plans that were put in place
Yeah,
back
so
in the day.
I thought of it, then forgot it, and now you helped me remember. So this development agreement was capped at 1,400 dwelling units. So as this goes down, we'll utilize GIS. So there's going to be a countdown. So every time we do a phase or development, whether it's a multifamily permit or a single-family lot, we'll be doing a countdown, assessing from 1,400 down to 0. We'll have some accountability measures for that we'll be relaying with the applicant through the process, as well as we got to keep 7% open space consistent with this project 2 being a residential mix. So both those will be assessed as we take down phases of this within their construction improvement plans and looking at is their proposal and what they plan on constructing for utilities and infrastructure and roads going to be consistent with that development agreement and that being a contract.
Okay, makes sense.
So there goes the intro into their proposal. Then we have this review criteria that we look at subdivisions for. We have 6 review criteria. First one deals with, can the subdivision be provided with an adequate supply for water? And so can you serve the subdivision? And so the City of Post Falls has reviewed everything west, and you see East Green Acres. East of Syringa said that they can provide, and they provided a will serve letter in that Exhibit A5 in your staff report. The second criteria is, can you serve it with sanitary sewer services? And you can see there that we did state that we have the capacity to provide service to this subdivision as proposed. Third criteria deals with transportation, and because of the extent of this, I'd like to ask Rob Paulus, the city engineer, to come up and speak to the nuances on how that was assessed in the staff report for his portion.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Robert Paulus, city engineer. So when we're looking at a project like this, and it has about 240 acres, it's a fairly large project, they don't tend to get built overnight with 1,000 lots. Historically speaking, we can take a look at Greenstone's project over in Montrose. That's about 640 acres, 25 years into development, and it still has several years left before it reaches build-out. Just down the street from this location, you have Crown Point subdivision, which was 108 acres, and that developed out over about a 10-year period. Immediately to the south of this subdivision, you have the Fieldstone subdivision, which was 330 acres, and that took about 15 years to build out. We have other examples of that as well. When you do that, you're not going to see the impacts of 1,000 new lots with 11,000 new trips appearing overnight. So it's going to develop gradually. It might be 15 years, it might be 20 years. We can't be positive on that. So what we rely upon is going into our transportation master plan. First, taking a look, does the overall project match what we anticipate for population and density in that area? Being single-family residential, back in 2017, we were anticipating that this area, the 240 acres more or less, was going to develop approximately 3,700 new residents to the city of Post Falls by the year 2035. Looking at what's being proposed here tonight, it is in general alignment with that, plus or minus about 10%. You know, I look at what they have out there, I would say they may be closer to about 4,000 new residents in that area by the time they reach build-out. But are they going to reach build-out in the next 10 years? That's questionable. What you see here is a snapshot from our transportation master plan's computer model for the year 2035. I've added the street names, I've added the details of what, when I click on a road, it tells me for information for what things are going to look like both now and for the year 2035. Prairie Avenue is a principal arterial roadway through the city of Post Falls, provides regional connectivity from Post Falls to the city of Coeur d'Alene and US Highway 95. Currently, Prairie Avenue has about 8,400 vehicle trips per day on it. That number is based off of ITD's traffic counts that were done last year. And by the year 2035, we're anticipating that number to about double, to around 16,000. Being a principal arterial roadway is designed to handle between 16 to 32,000 vehicles per day. So when we reach full development of Prairie Avenue, and if it's at 16,000 vehicles per day in 2035, we're going to be on the low end of what its capacity is. You see up there it shows V over C. For traffic engineers, that's volume to capacity ratio. It's our measure of how effective is that road doing during the PM or AM peak hours. We typically look at the PM peak hours as being the most impacted times of the day. Currently, as a two-lane facility, Prairie Avenue is operating at a V on C ratio of 57, which means it's at 57% of its capacity. We generally don't worry about improvements to the roadway till we get up to around 75 to 80% of its capacity. By the year 2035, our transportation master plan indicates we are going to need to have Prairie as a 5-lane facility. We are currently making progress on that from the east and coming this direction. And we also recently did some improvements on Prairie between Spokane Street and Chase Road. In 2035, with a 5-lane configuration, the volume to capacity, depending upon where you're at on that section between Idaho and Greens Ferry Road, will be operating around 55% of capacity, doing pretty good. Over on Greens Ferry Road, currently we have 6,000 vehicle trips per day. It's a 3-lane configuration operating at 31% of capacity, and by 2035, we still anticipate it needing to be a 3-lane configuration, and it'll be operating at about 47% of capacity. Syringa Street, which is going to bisect this project and also runs through Fieldstone Subdivision to the south, at the intersection of Syringa Street and Pole Line Avenue, which is right over by the American Legion post on the north side. That's currently operating, 2,000 vehicle trips per day in that area. For a minor collector roadway, that's pretty low. Minor collectors handle between 1,500 to 5,000 vehicles per day. By the year 2035, our model is indicating, and that's with the growth anticipated from this development, the 3,700 additional residents by 2035, we anticipate the volume to capacity ratio to be at about 18% of capacity. A lot of capacity still in that roadway. On the west side, Idaho Street, currently operating at 3,900 vehicle trips per day. Idaho Street is a minor arterial roadway. Minor arterial roadways handle between 6,000 to 15,000 vehicles per day. Right now, it is on the very low end. It's not even on where we typically anticipate minor arterials to be, but we expect Idaho Street to grow into its classification. Currently, it's at 27% of capacity, and by 2035, we anticipate it to be at 40% of capacity. So how are we going to maintain those capacities? This is showing the aerial view of the area and some of the projects that we have planned and that we anticipate between now and 2035. First of all, as I had previously mentioned, Prairie Avenue, we anticipate to have built out to a 5-lane configuration. Right now, we do have a capital improvement plan project to widen Prairie from State Highway 41 to Greens Ferry Road to a 5-lane configuration, and that would also include making some modifications to that traffic signal to accommodate a 5-lane roadway. We also have a CIP project for a roundabout over at Charleville and Prairie. That's just kind of some of the background, what we're putting in to help manage the traffic. On Greens Ferry Road, by 2035, we have in our CIP to install a traffic signal. We would also, at the time of development, take a look at the pros and cons of a roundabout versus a traffic signal to see which would work best for the situation, taking into consideration you have a school there. We also have a little bit of a more constrained area in that location, so a roundabout may or may not work, but we do have a traffic control device identified for that location. Penrose Avenue, also on here, identified as Hope Avenue, east of Greens Ferry, it's Hope. That is a major collector roadway going through the neighborhood. That means that through its design, that it should be able to handle between 6,000 to 12,000 vehicles per day. Our modeling shows that the projected traffic volume from this neighborhood is going to be less than 6,000, but we kept that classification. That's what our master plan calls for. And we also worked with the developer. We did a little bit of, not say finagling, but we made some adaptations in our road standard through there. There's a couple areas where Penrose Avenue from Idaho Street almost up to Syringa Street has been constructed with bicycle lanes. The way they've designed that neighborhood is they have the green strips in there, they have no houses fronting in there. A parking strip doesn't make any sense in that location, nor does a two-way center turn lane. However, they are providing the one lane in each direction, and they are providing bike lanes. As you take Penrose and go east of Syringa Street, it is going to widen out. It's going to have parking on both sides. There's some areas where there's going to be a little bit less parking because of how the lots are configured, but we'll be able to handle on-street parking with the smaller size lots, have bicycle lanes, and have the traffic going through there, and be configured more for the residential nature of a 25-mile-per-hour roadway. Similarly, we've done the same thing with Syringa Street. Up on Prairie between Greens Ferry and Idaho, right now, it is not in our CIP as being a funded project to make it 5 lanes. However, we anticipate in our transportation master plan that we're doing now and our next update to our impact fees that will be becoming a impact fee project. This developer, if that isn't an impact fee project, is responsible for widening Prairie Avenue to the south along their frontage, which right now would take Prairie Avenue from a 26-foot wide road to about 51 feet, which would allow for a 4-lane configuration, a 2-way center turn lane, 1 lane in one direction. Right now, I would anticipate probably in the westbound direction and 2 lanes in the eastbound direction. That would also help alleviate one of the concerns that I noticed in the public comments that were provided to you as well as city staff in the staff with the staff report, and that there were some concerns about speeds on Prairie Avenue. And looking at the collision history along there, the collisions that have occurred in the last 5 years are predominantly due to rear-end collisions. Providing a 2-way center turn lane will help alleviate that. We do show that Syringa Street would be restricted initially as a 3/4 turn movement. That means traffic from Prairie would be able to turn in with a left or a right, and that traffic leaving the site would only be able to make a right turn out. One of the things we would be looking at with our transportation master plan right now that we're updating is whether or not to increase Syringa to a traffic control device, a roundabout or a traffic signal. If that was the case, that would become a CIP project, and impact fees that are paid by homes and commercial properties as they develop would pay for those improvements. That's a long-winded, but at the same time, quick overview of transportation. Any questions?
I have a question, Rob. So Idaho Street goes down to Prairie, then it pops over and there's the railroad tracks there.
Mm-hmm.
So that stops all traffic. I mean, with all those cars going, I've been there when that backs up there.
Yes.
So what happens then?
Okay, so right now, the intersection of the Union Pacific Railroad and Idaho Street on the north side is scheduled on the state transportation improvement plan to receive crossing signals. When we widen Prairie Avenue, we know from what we recently did with the Spokane Street and Prairie roundabout, when we were initially designing that, we were looking at a single lane roundabout. our model analysis there said that's not going to make sense. Within 10 years of building a single-lane roundabout, you're going to have to go to a multi-lane roundabout configuration. So we built a 2-lane roundabout over there. Here at Idaho and Prairie, when we widen Prairie Avenue, either that roundabout needs to be torn out and rebuilt as a multi-lane roundabout, or the other thing would be to put in a traffic signal at that location. We have had some conversation with the Union Pacific Railroad. They are a little bit uncomfortable with the roundabout configuration that's there right now. And gut check says that we may more likely see a traffic signal at that location than a roundabout.
Yeah, because the little stop things for the railroad, that thing is backed up right there, and that's gonna back all the way up into what the roundabout is there now.
Well, it does right now, and that's why when we widen the roadway, we take a look and say, is a traffic signal going to work better? Or do you keep it as a roundabout and increase the size of the roundabout to a 2-lane roundabout? But as I said, I anticipate that the railroad is going to say, hey, we have some safety concerns about what occurs when you have a roundabout that close to the railroad.
Right.
But I think between the design of the traffic signal, you have the realistic, you take a look and say, okay, what are going to be the impacts when you do have the rail operations going through there? And, you know, the railroad won't tell you how many times a day the train goes through. It's around 6 to 12 times a day, at least based upon what I've been able to observe.
So nothing in what we're looking at today will address that issue. That's down the road. Somebody else will make that decision if it's a stoplight or if it's a double roundabout.
Well, I think within the next 10 years, we're going to have to solve that issue because our master plan is saying that by 2035, we need to have Prairie widened to a 5-lane. When we do that, we need to bring that roundabout or that intersection is a better way to speak of it, the intersection of Prairie Avenue and Idaho Street up into compliance to work with the 5-lane roadway.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just to make sure I got it correct here, so Penrose and Syringa will be at minimum, will be 3 lanes or 2, and
Penrose and Syringa will both be 2-lane roadways.
parking in some spots though?
Parking on Syringa north of Penrose and parking on Penrose east of Syringa Street. The configuration of the lots and the other roadways they have in there are not conducive to needing or benefiting from on-street parking south of Penrose or west of Syringa.
Gotcha. And then Prairie in between Idaho and Greens Ferry will be at least 4.
Would be at least 4 by 2035, and preferably we will have the funds and have it completely built to a 5-lane facility by that time.
But with this development, and I guess, it could take 10, 11 years, as they develop along Prairie, those improvements will be made, and hopefully the funds are there too, kind of a timing thing.
Well, yeah, and if you take a look at it, they've already started with North Place East down in the lower southwest corner. So our anticipation is that they are going to continue working their way east and then start working their way north. I would defer to the applicant to explain what his procedure and their thought process is. A lot of times that can change over the years based upon what market demands are. But when they develop a section, if it bumps into Idaho Street or Prairie Avenue, they're responsible, one, for the frontage improvements along that section, and we have an obligation to take a look at that and make sure that they are in compliance with fire and rescue requirements, that if they exceed a certain number of lots, they have to have more than one access point to that area. And then we also have to take a look and say, okay, when you're reaching a certain volume, what other ancillary improvements are needed as part of the overall subdivision to make sure that each phase is able to stand on its own and operate in case nothing else ever happens for the next 20 years after that phase.
How many trips, you've said before, do you figure a person makes a day that lives there?
A typical residential home makes about 10 trips per day. A multifamily makes about 9.5 trips per day. That's per the Institute of Transportation Engineers manual.
And you said there's 1,100 units here?
Yeah,
So that's 11,000
yeah.
trips on Prairie, Idaho?
Well, yeah, distributed between Idaho, Syringa, Greens Ferry, Hope Avenue, and Prairie, yes. And we've taken that into account. I'm going to go back a slide, I think. And so Prairie Avenue, currently at 8,400 trips per day. The model, which takes a look at the typical, you've got 3,700, 4,000 people in there, okay? The 1,100, some homes are up to 1,400 dwelling units. A certain percentage is going to go up to Prairie Avenue, a certain percentage is going to take Idaho or Greens Ferry to go down Pole Line, a certain percentage is going to use Syringa to go all the way. The Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization's model, which the city refines and builds off of, has done demographic research to say, okay, a certain percentage of the people work in Post Falls, a certain percentage work in Spokane, a certain percentage work in Coeur d'Alene, and here's how many typical trips a household does to take kids to school. All that's factored into the model and then distributes that traffic. So we say, okay, here's 3,700 people in this 240 acres, and the model says, okay, based upon that, it's going to be this many homes, this percentage of trips is going to be going to Spokane, this percentage. It's not a precise science. It's transportation engineering. We're trying to get our best idea of what the typical person is going to do. And there's orders of magnitude. If we're in the general idea of, yeah, 30 to 40% of the people go this way and the rest go that way, that's pretty good. And we can make our traffic signals and we can make our roads work and have that flexibility in the road design.
Is a trip one way?
A trip is considered one way. So when you leave your home in the morning, that's trip number 1. If you drive home for lunch, that's trip number 2. My daughter comes home after school and then wants to run out and go play with some friends and take the family car, and there's another trip.
It's hard to get to 11.
If you have 2 teenagers in your house, 15 is a low number, speaking from experience.
Well, all these, you say that we're at minimum, all these roads, but I don't know where the science is. I drive on these roads. It sure seems packed.
So which roads in particular are you thinking?
Well, Prairie or Idaho, or all of them. I'm out here all around.
So I'll disagree with you a little bit on that, because when we do calibrations of the regional model, we do try to calibrate existing conditions to actual field numbers. In the transportation master plan we're updating right now, we based modeling off of 80 major intersections in the city of Post Falls. I know that the regional KMPO model, which we built off of, has well over 200 intersections that they utilized for calibration in the area.
Yeah.
I have another question. Typically on these applications, it seems like the developer requirement on the road improvements is more detailed, but maybe I'm thinking of a different application. But is it because of the phased nature of this that they're being addressed as they come?
Yes, I mean, internally, we've got the road configurations laid out in the master development agreement, and they have shown that in their application here. So Syringa, Penrose are laid out. Idaho Street, Greens Ferry Road are arterial roadways, so they have to match our design standard for those roadways, which is a 3-lane arterial. Prairie Avenue is the same exact thing. Our standards already indicate that a principal arterial roadway is a 76-foot wide roadway, 5-lane configuration, 2 bike lanes, a 15-foot multi-use path on one side.
But they're not being required to do that right away because,
No, because what you do is you build each phase as a standalone phase, and you
Sure.
don't, the balance is you want to build the improvements as they're needed for each phase, and you don't have them go and build something that's on the complete opposite end that has no impact at that time.
sure.
They're trying to look at it from the standpoint of balancing how much revenue they're getting in to pay for the cost of improvements so they can sell more homes. We look at it from the standpoint of, we want to get the improvements in place so that you can get fire and rescue safely there and back, and that people can get to their jobs or to school or to the grocery store or whatever their needs are in a safe and reliable means.
Thanks.
Yeah, just a couple things I just want to verify. So an exit on Syringa, that would be the only exit allowed out of this development onto Prairie, except for Greensferry.
Yes.
Greensferry.
Prairie Avenue, and I didn't mention it early, is also identified as a critical arterial corridor by the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization. That puts restrictions as to how often and how close you can have access points onto Prairie Avenue. What the region is trying to do is to preserve capacity on Prairie Avenue so that it can provide the service that's needed, somewhat as a secondary route to get traffic so it doesn't have to go all the ways down to Southeast Way or I-90 to get east-west. And with that, you're limited to controlled intersections, that's being a roundabout or a traffic signal, to every half-mile spacing.
Okay, and another question, I don't know how much land on the east side or on the north side of Prairie that the city has for expansion of Prairie, but is the developer dedicating anything along Prairie for that future expansion?
The developer of this project dedicated their rights-of-way, it was prior to 2007 when they annexed into the city of Post Falls.
Okay,
And they annexed in the rights-of-way necessary, which still meets our current standard. If it wasn't per our current standard, they'd have to dedicate more. Most of the right-of-way along Prairie Avenue is around 105 feet in width. There is a small section towards, I'll show here. There's a small section on the western portion as you approach the roundabout that is down at 85 feet of width. So if that area doesn't annex into the city of Post Falls by the time that we move forward to widen the roadway, we would have to get into right-of-way acquisition to get the remaining rights-of-way that are needed, or look at how much road can we build within the rights-of-way that we can acquire.
okay. And Penrose will be the only entrance and exit allowed off of Idaho?
Penrose is the access that is shown. Those larger lots that are shown as multifamily. Multifamily would be allowed with the classification of a minor arterial roadway to have driveway approaches for that multifamily onto Idaho. We just don't allow single-family residential direct access onto an arterial because of safety concerns. Greens Ferry is somewhat similar in that you're going to have eventually Penrose punched out to Idaho, but then you're also going to have Killdeer Avenue, which is going to provide access from the site out to Greens Ferry.
So you're meaning like a driveway that would be for all of the, like a multifamily? If there was 10
Yes.
10 units,
So
that
you-
one driveway would be
Yeah, so you have a
10.
big multifamily unit. They all have the same
Driveway,
driveway that
okay.
they're able to pull forward out into Idaho Street and pull forward in off of Idaho Street.
Thank you.
Rob, I just have one clarification. A few minutes ago, I thought I heard you say Syringa and another road or two were 2-lane, but in the previous slide, it shows them as 3-lane. Can you explain, or?
The
Is that-
roads that are shown as 3 lanes are Idaho and Greens Ferry. Syringa, in its current configuration through Fieldstone Subdivision, is a 3-lane roadway. However, if you take a look at those numbers, at 2035 being only at 20% of capacity, a 3-lane roadway is overkill.
Right.
And
Meaning it has a center median, is that?
yeah,
a
the
center
two-way
turn lane?
center turn is the 3rd lane.
Okay.
So the two-way center turn lane isn't needed, and go back to the early 2000s when that subdivision was approved. Minor collector, that's what the minor collector standard was, and there was no flexibility in it. Today, we allow a little bit of flexibility, and if you want to try to maintain a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit and keep things at a slower speed, and which would be safer for people who live in the neighborhood, walk along the sidewalks, a two-lane configuration works a lot better in keeping things slower.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, I'll turn it back over to John.
Cool. Thanks, Rob.
All right, so we also looked at the subdivision, if there's any known soil or topographical conditions to present hazards on the site. That was not identified for this site area. The area proposed for the subdivision is zoned for the proposed uses, and the use conforms to other requirements found in the code. We did look at the development agreement. We've discussed the development agreement, so that goes in along with the residential mixed. And part of the intro, I did talk about the conformance with that. I will note we did look at similarities in zoning. So in the functionality of, and I'll actually go back to this layout here. You can see how Penrose going east-west, it functions very similar to a Bogey through, or Hope through Fieldstone. And in Syringa, it functions very similar to Fieldstone as well. I asked our GIS to look at the total number of units in Fieldstone, including the reserve, because that was the original Fieldstone planning area. And that came out to 1,100 units. This total being capped at 1,400 units is generally, so looking at the road layout in the general development from a density standpoint for zoning, it was identified as they're more similar than dissimilar with some differences, as the residential mix is a different zoning type, but compatible and deemed compatible with the surrounding land uses. Looking at has the developer made adequate plans to ensure that the community won't bear any more of its costs? How the city deals with this is with impact fees, with growth. The idea is growth pays for its impact on the community. The park in the middle of this, they do plan on coordinating with our city parks department, I believe, and dedicate that as part of a city park in the future, much similar to the park in Fieldstone. As far as they'll also be paying impact fees for some of the regional systems that Rob alluded to that are a part of capital projects. Those impact fees helped pay for those and mitigate those costs. You can see there that the arenas that they pay towards is parks, public safety, multimodal pathways, and streets. These are the agencies that were notified of this. Of that, we did hear from the school district. They stated that they were neutral on this proposed project, and that they were, though, in an MOU with the applicant, and the applicant can maybe expand on the details of that MOU, but yeah, they do have an MOU to potentially deal with potential impacts with the school. CUNY County Fire Rescue, they said they would coordinate at the time of development. That's often the case with subdivisions. We get the preliminary plans, the construction plan sets. They comment on them for their own safety, and they coordinate that prior to being constructed. YPL did comment, and that's the YPL pipeline. They said that there was no impact to them. The Post Falls Police Department, they remained neutral. DEQ said they had no environmental concerns. Post Falls Highway District did have some comments. That's why I had Rob stay up here so we can maybe talk about this. I will let Rob know that I did put a slide in here talking about the right-of-way if you want to use that. But
So Post Falls Highway District did provide a couple of comments. John Manley and I had talked with Post Falls Highway District late last week, and I talked with them a little bit more yesterday as well. And they recommend that the city takes a look at the traffic impacts to the existing system with each phase, which is what we are proposing to do. And I'd just like to reiterate that when we take a look at this, what is being proposed falls within the scope and nature of what we had put into our transportation master plan, and we are reasonably comfortable with what the results are going to be, that a safe and efficient road network can be provided at the year 2035 with what we have planned and called for in our transportation master plan and with those projects that we have already identified in our CIP. The other part that Post Falls Highway District called for was they wanted the city to annex Prairie Avenue along the northern boundary of this property. This is showing Prairie Avenue. The area in gray is in the Post Falls Highway District. What occurred was back when the lands for this property were annexed into the city well over 15 years ago, at that time, the city of Post Falls was looking at Prairie Avenue more or less as the end of the world, and we were going to keep Prairie Avenue as part of the Post Falls Highway District. Now the city of Post Falls is in control of most of the rights-of-way of Prairie Avenue from Fennicus Road, which is a half-mile east of Highway 41, all the ways to Prairie Avenue. There's this section, and then there's a couple of other small sections that are in the Post Falls Highway District. City staff doesn't have a problem with proceeding forward on doing a separate annexation to bring this section of Prairie Avenue into the Post Falls jurisdiction. It helps improve the ability to get the road improvements done in a timely manner without having to meet two sets of reviews and two sets of improvement standards. Post Falls Highway District has recommended this. We'd like to proceed forward with that. And right now, Prairie Avenue is maintained from the standpoint of snow plowing by the Post Falls Highway District under a agreement between the city of Post Falls and the Highway District. So there's some shared maintenance responsibilities that currently occur on that roadway.
Is there enough width to annex that without affecting the northern properties there?
We would just annex up to the existing northern right-of-way line. So it'd be that 106.
But it wouldn't be wide enough for 5-lane?
Not quite. The 85-foot wide section makes it a little bit tough to fit a 76-foot wide road in there. Any questions? Nope.
All right, so there's some of the 6 criteria that we have gone over and what we review subdivisions on to see if they're consistent with those 6. We'll bring this up again at the end. We'll go through each 6 individually, but yeah, it just kind of puts them all into one slide there. So.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Kevin Schneidmiller. I reside at 6552 East Octavia Court here in Post Falls. Again, as Mr. Manley said, I'm here representing the applicant, who is actually Greenstone Kootenai 2, the developer, and Schneidmiller Brothers is the landowner. Our request tonight is to approve to subdivide 238.5 acres, referred to as North Place East Subdivision. And as has been noted previously, the site is generally located east of Idaho, south of Prairie, north of the Fieldstone Subdivision, and it does not go quite to Greens Ferry. There's about 500 feet that it stops short. There's other subdivision and 5-acre tracts there. This work actually began, and we consider this all one project, even though we've come for 3 separate entitlements now. We started back in 2015 with 40 acres that is located on the north side, the west side of Idaho Street. And then in 2020, we came and requested a subdivision on 37 acres, which lays in the southwest corner of the 280 acres, so that we've got about 238 remaining. In October of 2021, we requested a change in zoning to the remainder of the property, which is the 238 from R1 to mixed use, and that's part of why we didn't entitle the entire 340 acres originally. We knew the city was considering this zone. We think it's an excellent zone to allow for different types of housing that hit different price points. And so we chose to kind of do it in pieces until we're at this point where, with the mixed-use zone now, we're requesting to subdivide the entire thing. We as a company are a strong believer in master planning. We believe it's good from a development standpoint. It's good for the city, and it's good for the community to be able to see what's in front of them. We could easily come with 20 or 30 acre subdivisions at a time. We just don't think that's an appropriate way to do it. We think this allows for better planning. Mr. Paula kind of described some of that from a road standpoint and so forth. The one item that I don't have on here that was alluded to by Mr. Paula, this property was annexed in 2006 into the city. At that time, there were kind of two things that were requested. One was some additional right-of-way along Prairie, which Mr. Paula alluded to, and the other item was that we dedicate the water rights that are on the property from an existing agricultural well, which the requirement was to do that when we started the subdivision work. So back in 2015-16, those water rights were transferred to the city. Again, some of the information, 238 acres zoning, we're requesting, it is zone mixed use. The number of lots are 1,125. And again, the question was asked, and the legal staff answered the question. We are capped at 1,400 units, so that kind of answers Commissioner Carey's question. We would not be able to do any higher density than what we're currently showing because we would quickly exceed the 1,400 units. And we agreed to that at the time of the zone change, along with capping any multifamily structures at 2 stories rather than the 3-story that are allowed by this zone. The total open space is almost 21 acres, 8.75%. The residential mixed-use zone requires 7%. Again, the density as shown is 4.72 lots per acre. I won't go into this too much. Mr. Manley talked about it. Fiber optics are provided by Spectrum, TDS, and Ziply, electrical and gas by Avista. And he kind of touched on the other servicers. So a couple of things that I want to point out with this is, again, you can see the area in the southwest corner. That's the 37 acres that was previously approved for subdivision. And we have a phase in for review at the city that will finish building that out in 2024. Mr. Manley noted that there's 2 locations for multifamily, one along Prairie and one along Idaho, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. Again, you can see the park, and it was determined during the zoning hearing that it would be a public park. In many of our master plan communities, we've done private parks that are owned and maintained by the HOA. We have a couple of those already, but the city requested that the main park be a public park, and we've had discussions with the Parks Department about collaborating on that park, both from a design and a construction standpoint. Our preference is to get it done sooner rather than later, so the citizens of Post Hall can enjoy it. So this one, and I apologize, it's a little bit hard, but this is what I wanted to point out regarding open space. The dark line, the trail system, that is proposed for this subdivision. It continues along Idaho, Prairie, up Syringa, along Penrose, with 4 or 5 connections from the residential development out to Prairie, and additional ones throughout the community. Trail systems are a big part of our master plan communities, and I have commended the city of Post Falls before. They have done a tremendous job of creating a trail system citywide that we develop in a lot of areas in the Spokane, Kootenai County area, and it's second to none. So regarding the open space, and again, we consider this all one project. So in the lower left corner, you can see that black box. That is Penrose Park that was developed with the 40-acre subdivision that we did west of Idaho Street. That will very much be able to be used by all the residents of North Place. And while from an entitlement standpoint, the city likes us to designate a name for the project. So this is North Place East that we have before you tonight. But the entire North Place project will be controlled and managed by one homeowners association. There is no difference from the west side and the east side. In addition to that, kind of right in the middle of the 37-acre subdivision we're just completing, there's a small pocket park, a little over an acre, called Haystack Park. And that one, as well as Penrose, are both fully developed and being used by the residents. Again, then right in the center is the future city park. This is just kind of an overlay so you can see a little easier. Just off of Idaho Street is where Penrose Park is. That was a 4-acre park because we did that 40 acres as a PUD, which requires 10 acres of open space to be dedicated. So, and it, on the south side, it abuts the Prairie Falls Golf Course. This is, and I apologize, it's a little hard, but as part of the phasing plan or area plan that the city requires us to do, we've done 6 areas. And the thing that I want to point out here is Area 1 and Area 2, which are are west of Syringa and north of Penrose. That is slated to be a 55-plus community, and it will be legally designated as a 55-plus community.
How many people in
which
that?
restricts the demographic that can live there. So that's why you see the multifamily lots along there. We always like to put a multifamily component as part of our 55-plus communities because there are a certain amount of people that no longer want to be homeowners. They want to rent, but they like to be in that community. It's highly amenitized. It will have a clubhouse with amenities for uses by those residents. But the really big component is that it's maintenance free. So all the lawn care, snow removal of driveways and things like that are all taken care of as part of their additional homeowners association dues. So in addition to the multifamily you see there, there would also be a space created there for the clubhouse and the amenities that go along with that. Right now, as you all know, pickleball courts are kind of a big deal. So that's what I wanted to point out. Likely, this is a 15 to 20, maybe 25-year build-out. Mr. Paulus referenced Montrose. When we first started into that in 1998, we projected that to be a 15 to 20-year build-out, and we're at 25 years and probably have another 10 to go. So this is a smaller site, but anticipate 15 to 20 years. Because of the mixed-use nature, we will likely be building in multiple locations at one time. We usually do smaller phases that are 20 to 35, maybe up to 40 lots at a time. But because of the 55-plus neighborhood, we'll likely be developing in there as well as outside of there. So there will definitely be kind of a two-pronged approach. The other thing was kind of noted, we always believe in placing the higher density residential adjacent to residential collectors and/or arterials. In this case, both Penrose and Syringa are residential collectors. So you can see that we have kind of placed most of the high density adjacent to those streets. And again, Mr. Manley pointed out the commercial lots across from the park. And I simply added these pictures to show examples of what we've done in other areas. It's very important from our standpoint to make sure that they're scaled to a residential setting. So you don't have large two-story commercial and larger facilities. Very much just uses like coffee shops, donut shops, maybe a small restaurant. We're talking usually in the 2,000 to 3,000 square foot unit. So this is kind of an example. This is the same picture from a different angle, and you can see the residential kind of in the background there. So you can see how these commercial buildings very much blend in with the residential, and then we pay very close attention to how it scales in that way. These are just examples of our single-family residential homes. These are some of the homes that are built in our 55-plus community. They're always all ranchers, and usually they vary in size, just like in a normal neighborhood, anywhere from 1,400 square feet up to a couple thousand square feet. These are some examples of the attached residential single-family product that we do. Again, we don't like to build them in large masses. We will break it up. So you'll see where we may do a building like this, and then we may do some smaller cottage homes so that the street just, as you drive down, it doesn't look like a mass of two-story buildings. Just another example of a product we build, and the same there. So again, none of these are any taller than a two-story single-family home. We believe that the proposal is supported by the Post-Fall Comprehensive Plan goals and policies. It conforms substantially to the zone change request that was processed and approved in 2021. We followed very closely to the kind of bubble map that Mr. Manley showed in creating the subdivision map that we're presenting tonight. What we believe the RM zone does and what we're proposing tonight allows for the creation of economically diverse housing types and active residential neighborhoods. And that's one thing that's very important to us, and that's why we like to create a very extensive trail system and add some small commercial so people can stay in their neighborhood as much as they possibly can, do a lot of walking and bicycling. Again, as I said, we like to create neighborhoods that fit and scale with one another and are aesthetically pleasing. And finally, we concur with all the conditions that the staff has proposed. We have no issues with those. We fully understand our requirements from a road standpoint. We understand that we will be building our half of Prairie Avenue from Idaho Street to the eastern boundary of this project, as well as building Syringa and Penrose, and of course all the local residential streets. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
You talked about phases. Do you know exactly how many and where those phases will be?
Well, we know that we will continue, as you saw where we've currently been constructing, we will continue to build east from there, so
Okay.
east of Syringa.
Okay.
We may go north because our desire to get the park finished means that we will need to have the roads completed all the way around that park. So we may do a phase so that we can construct the streets all the way around the park. Penrose will be completed to Syringa by then, so the southern boundary of the park will be taken care of. But we'll need to be able to complete Syringa at least to the north boundary of the park, and then the east street and the north residential streets. And then, of course, as I said, we will, in 2025, if this project is approved, we'll start a phase in the 55-plus community.
Okay.
And that will start somewhat, let's see. So you can see the street that runs just to the north-south, just to the east of the multifamily lot in the gated community. So the first phase in the 55-plus would be just to the east of that to pick up residential. And then likely the clubhouse as well, which we're now projecting will be on the north end of those multifamily lots.
Okay, so you don't completely have it exactly.
No, we
each
don't,
phase,
because again,
but-
it's somewhat
But you're gonna kind of move it.
market-driven, and as
Okay.
Mr. Paul has stated, we have a requirement to meet the International Fire Code regarding access and making sure we're providing the proper ingress and egress out of any one phase. So that, a lot of times, that drives it, along with, certainly there will be a desire to get Syringa and Penrose built as well.
Okay.
Because those being collector streets that will carry traffic not only from this development, but to the south and other ones. It'll be important to get those done.
Okay,
So,
that makes sense.
Commissioner Wilhelm.
So you just said that the 55 and older is on track pretty quick, right? How many units are in there, about?
Well, it's about 75 acres. So again, that's not high density because they're all, most of them are single-family detached. So at 3.5, there's probably be 250 to 300. You have to keep in mind that when we do a preliminary subdivision, or anyone does it, you're going to lose some lots because we have stormwater to take care of as part of the design. So we anticipate usually we're going to lose about 10% of the lots through design. Some of the lots are going to get larger and so forth. But to answer your question, somewhere between 250 and 300 homes.
Thank you.
You've already answered a couple of my questions, but another one, on the neighborhood commercial, I noticed that there's like 4 different locations on the map that you could have that. Have you decided where, or is that going to go as you flow?
Right. And our experience shows us that in a residential neighborhood like this, you're very limited to how much actually works from a market perspective. And so at this point, we don't anticipate doing any more than what we actually are showing here. Could even be a little bit less. Again, of anything in a project like this that's market-driven, it is the commercial, because you've got to find end users who want to take the risk to be there. This site, and through the process of getting to the point we're at tonight, obviously we've had a lot of discussions with staff. And one of the questions that they kept asking, because of Prairie Avenue, don't you think there may be an opportunity off of Prairie and Syringa? Maybe at this point, we don't anticipate. We're not interested in doing large type commercial. So again, we believe in our experience in other master plans that we've done where we've done commercial, what we're showing is about the right amount. Yeah.
Okay, just another quick question on that. I don't know if it would be you or the planning department. Is there a buffer required of some type between a commercial and the residential, whether it be trees or something? So it's not just a,
When a commercial use is adjacent to a single-family lot, then there is a buffering requirement. If it's against a multifamily project, commercial and multifamily do not require a buffer, so depending on the
it's going
use.
to be against it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. One thing I might add along those lines, because this question kind of came up during staff. So all of our townhome product has It's alley loaded, so it's going to be off alley. Garages are off the alley, but they're all two-car garages, just like a single-family home, unless you need single-family, you could go to three-car. But they're all two-car with 2 spaces in the driveway for parking. So we view it from the actual unit standpoint that the parking that we're providing is the same as we would provide for a single-family detached home. So we don't anticipate maybe as much on-street parking as staff might, and that's all right. We can always agree to disagree, and in that case, as Mr. Paul said, we agreed to build the street to the standard that's required by the city. But we don't anticipate, and our experience shows in other communities, we don't see much more on-street parking than you'll see in a residential, single-family detached neighborhood. Okay?
So on the, I don't know, what you call it, the regulatory map, your bubble map, and I think this kind of goes with your question, there was neighborhood commercial among Idaho and Prairie, and then obviously right in the middle there. You're probably thinking right by the park for right now. Obviously, things could change, but you're only looking at those lots by the park for neighborhood commercial, correct?
That's correct, yeah. I mean, again, as the bubble map Mr. Manley showed, there's a location out by Prairie and Syringa, one on the southeast corner of Penrose and Syringa. But what you see is our plan, and if anything we feel pretty confident in, it's the amount of commercial that works. I mean, on a project that's 15 or 20 years, is there a possibility we could come back on the residential side and ask for some modification? There certainly could be. I can tell you in Montrose, I think we've probably been back 3 or 4 times in 25 years. But this site, because of Prairie Avenue in Idaho, I mean, we're restricted to access. We're restricted really to access with Penrose going out in the southern corner. So I wouldn't anticipate, with my experience, that we would do a lot of modification to this. The other thing is the RM zone allows some flexibility, and we've already built that in with the different product type. The one thing I didn't mention, the multifamily up at along Prairie, we will reserve that site. We have a tentative MOU, which I've met with the superintendent of schools twice, and so we think we have in general concept, we have an agreement to that MOU. Obviously, she needs to take that to the school board. But the multifamily site you see up there along Prairie is right at 10 acres, like 10.8 acres. The school would require 10 acres for an elementary. So we, part of that MOU, we've committed to reserving 10 acres for them until they make a decision that they want a school at this site. I might add that during the zone change, we reached out to them to see if they wanted a school site here. And the response at that time was no. And the reason was they have Greens Ferry Elementary that's right in the southeast corner of this project in Fieldstone. And then they have Prairie View Elementary just to the south. So their preference was to be able to spread them out a little bit and find another site. So when the comment period went out, this went out to the public, she reached out to me kind of last minute. We've been strong supporters of the school district for a long, long time. And so we agreed we'll work with you and figure something out. So that's kind of where we're at on that. So, okay?
Well, I got one more question. Neighborhood commercial, what are your thoughts on if there was a condition of neighborhood commercial being only 1 story? Does that give you any heartburn?
No, we have no problem with that. So.
Okay. And then for the commission members, do you guys have any other things? There's 13 different conditions in here. Any other thoughts on possible conditions you were thinking about as we went through this while we have the applicant here? That's the only one I could initially thought about.
here.
Yeah, it's pretty thorough. Okay.
Extensive, yeah. That
Okay,
might be
thank you.
Any other questions? Cool. All right, thank you.
The real conditions of the limitation structures.
All right, public opinion, public testimony. All right, All right. I'm just going to go through these one by one. If you're wishing to speak, please come up. You'll have 4 minutes. Please state your name and address. There's a timer up front here that Mr. Manley will run, and we'll go through. If you have questions that during your time up here, please, that are kind of directed either towards city staff or the developer, please ask those. It's not a back and forth here, but you can ask those during your time, and then we'll circle back, but it's not a back and forth, so please ask your questions during that 4 minutes, and then we should be able to circle back and answer, but it's not a back and forth, so. All right. In favor, let's see, nope, wishing to speak, neutral, Steve Bush. And if you're not wishing to speak, I'll just read your comments, but if you are, I know, Mr. Bush, you have comments here, I'll let you speak to those.
Sure. Hi, my name's Steve Bush. Will be a neighbor at 3759 North Eli. So I'm not opposed to the development. I checked the neutral box because I know people have to live somewhere. My wife and I are refugees from the state of Washington, so we've moved here into one of those developments. My question is, and I guess to the applicant and to the commission, is about energy infrastructure. I know we were here last winter, and of course the whole region was under a request to cut back on natural gas, which then turned into a request to cut back on electricity during the coldest snap we had all winter. And I've been a 30-year resident of the area, so this was a really cold snap. And so my question is, this was caused by, under my understanding, was caused by a failure of a single pump at a single gas pipeline to the region. Okay, so that's kind of scary. We're talking, this development is not being done in a vacuum. There's building going on all over the region, from Hayden all the way to the state line. We need more energy infrastructure. We need more supply. What's being done to address that? We've heard that there is adequate water, adequate sewer treatment, adequate roads. What about the energy supply? That puts us all at risk for not addressing that. And Avista may say, it's adequate. I don't like that answer. I want to know what's being done to increase the supply. So that's my only question. I'm sure maybe the applicant can answer that. But I didn't see any comments from Avista, and I didn't see anything about energy infrastructure. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, not wishing to speak in opposition. Sorry if I mess up anybody's name tonight. Is it Ashley Horst? I oppose any apartments or commercial lots in Idaho and Penrose. Before purchasing our home in 2022, we were told it would be a one-story 55 community, and our backyard has views of those lots, which we paid a premium for. Not wishing to speak in opposition, Joshua Ennis. It was my understanding this subdivision across from me would be a single-story 55 above dwelling. I'm concerned about the possibility of multifamily story homes, which will eliminate our view of the mountains, which we value greatly. I'm concerned this could affect the value of our home in the future, especially if the vicinity of multifamily units. Not wishing to speak in opposition, Catherine Zimmerman. I oppose any commercial or multifamily units at the corner of Idaho and Penrose. We were told the area would be single-family, 55 community. This would affect the traffic. We were never told this would take place. When we purchased the property, this was misinformation at the time of my purchase. Not wishing to speak in opposition is Heather Conway, and there was no comments, just in opposition. Not wishing to speak in opposition, Gail Prius. We were told the future development of this parcel would be for cottage homes over 55. No plans for a commercial directly behind the walking trail was never, ever revealed. Not wishing to speak in opposition, John Prius, same as before. Not wishing to speak in opposition, Logan Storm. No comments, just in opposition. Not wishing to speak in opposition, Kyle Storm. I oppose having any multifamily, single-family attached, or commercial building in the subdivision. Only single-family detached is appropriate for this area based on the zoning of the surrounding area. It is already too much traffic despite your studies and demographics, and will create more safety problems for the residents. Wishing to speak in opposition, Julie Hensley. Name and address for the record, please.
I'm Julie Hensley. I live at 1360 East Warm Springs Avenue. So the North Place East proposed development lacks 2 of the necessary requirements to be approved. Letter C of the review criteria, which they put as 3 on there, proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. Syringa Street is classified as a minor collector road. Minor collector roads are only supposed to support 5,000 vehicles a day. In current plans, Syringa is the only street that gives access to Prairie Avenue. Most of the higher density homes in the neighborhood are on Syringa Street. Also, the 4 possible commercial node sites along Syringa Street, bringing even more vehicles there. I have called the KMPO and the Post Falls Highway District, and there's been no impact study done. The city engineer stated that there's currently 2,000 vehicles on average just between Pole Line and Bogey. And just so you know, 2,000 vehicles per day, 5,000 vehicles, that's at 40%. I don't know where he got 15% at. It is already at a 40% capacity without those homes being built. How is Syringa gonna stay under that 5,000 vehicles per day with that proposed development? There needs to be at least an impact study done because of the number of proposed lots, the increased traffic for commercial use, and the number of higher density homes puts more vehicles on Syringa Street than the comprehensive plan has designated for this road. Note that Syringa Street is the only road from Mullen to Prairie Avenue with such a low traffic classification. The development also lacks a requirement of F, which was 6 on there. The developer has made adequate plans to ensure the community will bear no more than its fair share of cost. Schools will highly be impacted by this development and cause either overly crowded schools or substantially raise taxpayer taxes by the money needed to be collected to build the new schools. I called the City of Post Falls School District, and per their assistant superintendent, the schools are at 100% capacity currently, and yet we're still building thousands of homes in our community. The Schneidmillers have stated they're willing to hold off on building 8 to 10 acres of land that we, the taxpayers, can buy to build the new school. Unfortunately, current state legislation doesn't allow for us to collect impact fees for our schools or police department. So guess who will pay for the price for this kind of development? The kids will be the first ones to pay the price with the overcrowding of schools, and then the taxpayers will pay the price by having to buy the land and pay for the school to be built. The superintendent agrees that this plan will cause a need to increase taxes. Building a school requires a bond to be passed. It has become difficult to even have a levy passed that only takes a majority vote. And yet we expect a bond to be passed that takes 2/3 vote to say yes. So yes, our kids will pay the price first. Also note, as of last week, the city engineer didn't know about the proposed 8 to 10 acre lot and is concerned because of the poor planning that went into building Greens Ferry Elementary School, because of all the tiny streets that are being built to slow down the cars, yet can be seen as a hazard when a school is built upon these type of roadways. The Planning Division, the City Council, and the school district was warned about changing from R1 to RM around 3 years ago. Those fluffy cloud circles, once depicted on a plan, are now microscopic lots. The high-density homes along Idaho Street and Prairie aren't even depicted on that plot map yet. I hope the city learns from this, because those fluffy clouds from afar can end up being a storm that destroys the city you love. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, wishing to speak in opposition, Dale Gaboni. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
My name is Dale Gibney, and I live at 1390 East Warm Springs. And I probably need 30 minutes to talk to you about this. The planning that's going on in this city is almost non-existent. What I would like to know is your comp plan. Did you talk to the citizens and ask them what they want here? And I don't mean just a board of maybe 10 or 15 or 20. Did you do a survey and ask the citizens of Post Falls what they want this city to look like in 15, 20, or 30 years out? That should be the determining factor of what's going on. I recognize the right of the developer to build on his property and do what he wants, but we need to get this under control. 3 years ago, the mayor said I wanted to shut the door now that I've got a place here in Post Falls. That's not the case. You cannot stop the population growth, but you need to control it and have the infrastructure to handle what's going to come. I doubt that you've dealt with this before, this rapid growth that's going on not only in Post Falls but all the surrounding area. Have you gone and talked to any of the cities that have experienced the same thing in the past and see how they've handled it? Ask them what worked, what didn't work. Fieldstone has an HOA right now of 750 homes. That's a lot for a group of volunteer residents and homeowners to manage. They've asked the city, can we divide this and split it into 4 different groups? No. Why? There's not enough green space for each one of those, the requirements. There is for the entire project, but not for if you divide it. These things need to be considered. When you have a 1,400 unit development, you're going to have citizens volunteering to manage that. That is a huge, huge project for them. As Julie Hensley just explained, some of these streets that you have approved before have turned into 1 lane when you get parking on both sides of them. Go by Greens Ferry Elementary School in the morning when the kids are coming in there. Of course, school's out now. You got cars parking on both sides and it's 1 lane going through there. Prairie with the railroad tracks, you're talking about a problem that's going to be occurring there with backing up traffic. What are you going to do about that? Don't kick that can down the road now, because in 10 more years it's going to be even more expensive to fix that than what it is if you do it right now. Post Falls School District saying that they're staying neutral. There is no neutral on this. It creates a problem if they stay neutral. If they're at 100% capacity now, what is it going to be? You can't get a levy passed right now on the first vote. A bond to build a new school is not going to go over well. There needs to be changes in state law, and the school needs to start speaking up. You have reasons to either slow this down or stop it. And if you don't, you haven't done your homework. Just the fact that we don't have enough school space right now would be a good reason. So I ask you to look into these things. Take a look at what the other cities that have had this rapid growth experience. Some of them handled it well, some of them didn't. Please do your homework on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, no clapping, please. Wishing to speak in opposition, Sarah Gladio. Thank you, sorry.
So I know we're not going to stop this, but I don't
Oh, name and address,
sorry,
just,
Sarah Gaudio from
Just so we can get
the
on the record.
reserve. Yeah, I'm at the reserve, just so you know. We're not going to stop. I understand the homes. I don't like the commercial. I don't like the townhomes. And if I'm understanding this correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have an ingress and egress. There's only two, correct? You have nothing on Prairie, coming off of Prairie? So in other words, if there's a fire or the police department has to come in, they have to come in just those two areas. Syringa comes through and by a park, am I not correct? And you want to make that a main thoroughfare? I mean, if you guys want to really look at the maps, because these are really not good, especially for me who's not Columbus, but I don't understand how you're going to do that. If a ladder truck has to come through because you guys are building these apartments or condos or whatever you want to call them, it's going to be a nightmare, and I know because I've been in the fire department. So I don't understand how you guys are going to do just that. Right now, the schools, if you watch, and if you're there and the schools let out or they let in or they're putting in, it is a nightmare out there. Just along Greens Ferry Road, coming off of Bunting, I mean, and just the high school and everything else, you're planning on making that a 3 or 5 lane. What are you guys going to do for the high school, the junior high, the elementary school that's out there, Greens Ferry Elementary? How are you guys going to control that? You know, everybody's worried about their kids getting run over right now. I can't even imagine what's going to happen 10 years from now. I don't know if that's something that you guys can do, is maybe have something coming off of Prairie, excuse me, coming off of there, so any big vehicles or police department, they don't come in from just 2 areas and they got to figure out where they got to go. That's something to think about. I don't know, ambulance, you know, your 55 community, whatever you guys are going on, but that's my thought process. The commercial later on is, I don't know, I've been there, done that. It starts out really nice and then it goes downhill. So I don't know how you guys want to work that. I don't know if putting a park in the center of it makes it all okay. I just don't. I don't mind a single-family home. You guys want to put single-family homes, make single-family homes. But this, it seems like Post Falls just going, okay, we're just going to throw something here, then we'll put some single-family homes here, then we're going to put apartment buildings here. It doesn't make sense. There's no rhyme or reason to it. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to stop. I just wanted to let you guys know what's going on and the thought process. We didn't get this, none of us in the reserve. I think I'm the only one in the reserve that got this.
What are you saying, the reserve?
The reserve is off of Greens Ferry, off of Bunting in that area, sorry, yeah, off of there. Nobody ever got this. I was calling people today, they go, we never got this. So nobody really knows what's happening. I don't know if, you know, you have the fire department being built, that's being built on Prairie right there. I hope that they are large enough to do the capacity that they need to do for that area. That's all I'm saying, safety and health and safety.
Thank you. All right, wishing to speak, Susan, is it Vendetti? Vendetti. You didn't mark, but based on your comments, I'm thinking in opposition.
My name's Susan Vendetti. I live at 998 East Percival Avenue, and I'm very much opposed to this plan. First of all, okay, so we live right in, I wish I had a pointer, but where you see Penrose, we're just off of Penrose. There's a little street right now that's Heaton that's going to be going across into where would be the proposed either multifamily or whatever that is right there. So this greatly affects us because we're very much right off of, I mean, some of our homes across the street are backed up to Penrose. And I look at that and I see, as was said before, very few outlets for an emergency. And you know, I thought when we moved in, I thought, well, this is good. We're off of a entrance there. It's a short entrance. Fire and emergency can get through to us. But you look at that, and you're going to have massive amounts of increased traffic going through. Everybody talks about these, main arterials with Prairie and with Idaho, but what about, look at Penrose. Penrose is going to be very congested. You're going to have problems with Penrose and Idaho. You're going to need a light there because it's going to be too congested. You've got it's showing on this side of North Place, but it's not showing that Penrose goes across the street. So you've already got congestion in that direction. And then you look at what we were told, and all of us were told the same thing, that it's going to be single-family homes. And, 55 and older, we don't care, but multifamily, it's way too much for the amount of roads that they're talking about. And Mr. Wilhelm, you brought up Prairie and Idaho. That is a major accident waiting to happen. I've been there when the trains came through, and it was backed up, almost got rear-ended, because when you're coming down Prairie, going west on Prairie, and you start to hit that roundabout, not realizing that there's cars right there that stopped. And I'm like, stop that guy behind me, It's dangerous. And then you're talking about all this increased congestion and multi-lane roundabouts. Forget it. Been there, done that. We lived in Western Washington, we had those, and it was just accident upon accident upon accident. And then major mess. So I don't know, I'm very much opposed to this whole thing. And I can tell you, here we lived right across the street, never got any notification this was going on. I asked many of my neighbors, no notification. We got nothing in the mail, we got nothing, nothing.
Are you saying across the street, across Idaho Street?
No, we live in
Bottom
this-
left-hand corner there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you see that little, the little cross street, the first cross street as you come into the development. We're on Percival, which is
Okay.
right there.
Okay.
No notification. I asked my neighbors to the north of me, to the south of me, behind me, none of them knew about this. So you're seeing not many people here, but I can tell you that if we had been notified, and this should have been transparent, we have a right to know what's going on. And even as I hear this, I don't really hear, I'm sorry I'm going on, but I have not even really heard what the true phases are. So we have to be approving something that we have no clue what's really going on. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Wishing to speak in opposition, Bob Harmon.
My name's Bob Harmon. I live at 1305 East Percival. One of my questions is possibly considering swapping the multi-use family to the north side on the corner of Prairie and Idaho to get that big unit away from Penrose. I live a little bit east of where the multi-unit is proposed, but all those homes that are directly to the north of Penrose, are those going to be the 55 and older? Because that's what we were told when we moved in, and it seems to possibly be changed. Another thing, we have dogs. If you guys are going to put these trails in, walking paths, can you please put in more waste containers for the dogs. There's very few that are out there now. And as far as the railroad crossing at Idaho and Prairie and the roundabout, I work for the railroad. I don't work for Union Pacific. I work for BNSF. I'm an engineer. I'm on a train a lot. And the train traffic is going to continually increase. The railroads are gaining more business a lot. That crossing is going to get more trains than they do now. It's just going to continue to grow. And it's a dangerous intersection if you're on Idaho already, because there are no crossing gates there. It's just a sign that says stop. And so I work for the railroad. I've almost gone through it myself several times just because it's not very visible. And if you get more traffic through there, that's going to have to change somehow. So anyway, thank you.
Hey, one quick question.
Sure.
You said swap the 4 on Prairie for the big unit. What do you talk, which one?
Right there in the bottom left, the multi-use
So you're off Idaho, right?
of Idaho and Penrose.
Okay.
Move that to the north where it's
Push that to the
Prairie
northwest.
and
Okay.
Idaho.
Okay. I just want to make sure I was
And then
heard you
put the
right.
residential.
Gotcha.
And another thing, if you're going to keep, or wherever you put that multi-use, having driveway access off of Idaho would be, I would think, keep a lot of traffic out of the neighborhood going off of Heaton that the other lady was talking about to access that multi-unit place. So, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Wishing to speak, neutral, Donald Barker.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Don Barker. I live at 4267 North Shelburne Loop. I live west of Idaho Street in North Place. So my concern is the traffic, for one. Traffic has been a lot more than, it's been pretty bad. And a lot of times they travel at a high rate of speed, especially at night. Turns into a racetrack. So for emergency vehicles, limited ability to get out of that new area there, you're going to end up getting some people injured if there isn't something done about controlling the speed limit there or that traffic, for one. Also, regarding the multi-use, or actually the multi-family area, I was under the understanding that it was a single-family, single-story type of unit. The multifamily thing, that's going to have a lot more traffic dumping off Penrose onto Idaho, and then you got all that traffic moving at a high rate of speed. Bit of a concern there. Y'all probably already know this, but there's multiple trains a day. It's not like one train a day or 2 trains a day. It's multiple trains all day long. And so that area is just going to get worse when you start stacking all those people up from this subdivision, the new part, into that area. Guess that's it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time. Have a great day.
Wishing to speak in opposition, Peter. Am I going to try to do your last name? There you go. Thank you.
My name is Peter Judo. I live at 3090 North Andromeda, Post Falls. I guess what I'm going to say is I don't think it's the right time for this proposed master plan development. You know, they, as already pointed out before, there's a lot more development still being built out, Montrose, Fieldstone, and, you know, it's not just Post Falls, there's also Washington, Coeur d'Alene that they're building there. And, you know, they come and they give you this master plan community and they promise you, oh, you know, we're going to give you this park, we're going to give you these trails, we're going to give you this open space, we're going to give you beautiful area. And then once you rubber stamp it, it's right to the building houses 5 years later and still no parks, no trails. You know, maybe they plant a couple trees. So, I mean, I guess, you know, what's the harm in trying to make them give you what they promised 15 years ago, 10 years ago, before you just keep rubber stamping new plans every time they come up? And I know, you know, it gives money to the town, so it's not a bad thing, but they're not going anywhere. They're going to still be around. You say no, it's not like they're going to leave Post Falls and never come back. And then traffic obviously is a concern, you know, and you get your city engineer and, you know, they're trying to plan it out. And you got to think, well, how well can they plan it out? There's towns in Washington that are trying to pass their own ordinance of not allowing through traffic because you got Google Maps now, you got Waze, you got Apple Maps. And when there's congestion going to be on Prairie or whatever street, Idaho Street, it's just going to take you right through the residential streets. That's what they do. Google Maps plans it for the least traffic. So, you know, once Prairie becomes congested, they're going to tell you go through this street, go through that street, and you're going to be driving through parks, you're going to be driving through schools or whatever, trails, and it could definitely make it more dangerous. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Go. Thank you. Wishing to speak in opposition, Jill Storm.
Hello, thank you for taking public comment. My name is Jill Storm, 979 East Percival is my street. There have been many people here who very eloquently spoken about concerns that I have, so I will try not to repeat that, but I agree with them. And these are the citizens that it will directly affect. So I'm asking you to please consider the people that are already bought. And I'd also like to ask a question of the developer. I'm a little unclear because it sounds like things are not set in cement. So is that indeed in that corner a 55-plus community?
Well, he can.
Yeah, okay.
He can answer when he comes back up for rebuttal.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
So you
Okay.
can. I mean, he's got the question.
So
He'll answer it. Yeah.
It just seems like there's kind of this fluid. We'll see how it goes, and I think that brings a lot of concern on the half of the neighborhood because we're not sure, and so we wanted to know what is for sure, and then what stages are you going to do first, second, maybe an estimate of years. This year we're going to focus on this. This year we're going to focus on that. I think transparency is very important. I share the concerns that a lot of people did not even know about that, even though they may not be looking directly at the empty field right now. There are people who are concerned because it does affect them on traffic and other issues that have been brought up. So I think it would be transparent to invite everybody or let everybody know about this so they can have a chance to voice their concerns. I also want to address the transparency on what I've heard repeatedly through people saying here is that they bought on a promise by their realtors that would be a 55-plus single-story community. That's what they bought on, and they paid a premium for that, knowing that it would not be turned into apartment homes or any other double-story. So I think that is something as a developer, please convey that is really important, that you uphold that integrity to those who have already purchased that are in that neighborhood. And then lastly, on the issue of transparency, there is a sign on the corner of Heaton that says future home of a park. That is not the future home of the park. The future home of the park is farther down on Syringa, and there's already a park on Syringa, a little bit farther back. But it's like we're trying to get more people to come to this neighborhood by the promise of a park. I think in order to have transparency, you should put the whole plan up there and let people know this is what we intend to do. So I'm just asking for transparency and for you to be faithful to keep the commitments that you made to all those who already have purchased in the Greenstone neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Wishing to speak in opposition, Dirk Wigglers? Wiggers? Sorry.
I mean, other people have made some comments that I was already going to make, but I guess I just want to focus on and I wrote this one down there. I have concerns every time a new development starts about the road infrastructure, because it seems like the roads get damaged, roads that are already struggling, and then suddenly even the first little portion of the neighborhood, I forget the name of the one at the northeast corner of Prairie and Chase. Prairie pretty much got demolished as soon as that development started to go through. The roads need to be redone before the development starts. And then beyond that, I just want to make a comment that when I opened up the sheet that shows that picture, I was in shock at how dense it was. It just doesn't seem livable. I think you're going to have families so close together there that there's going to be tension because they're so stinking close together. And that doesn't fit what Post Falls was to me when I moved here 25 years ago. I mean, you just consider the fact that they mentioned that the Fieldstone, which is that size or bigger, has 700 and something units, and they're wanting close to 1,400 in this new area. It just doesn't make sense. It's way too dense, and I make several comments that I wrote down there about why there's no guest parking if the houses are that close together. You can't have a guest come over. So those are my concerns. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. Wishing to speak neutral, Daniel Liebel?
My name is Daniel Liebel, and I live at 1096 East Percival Avenue. So predominantly, I have a couple questions for Mr. Schneidmiller, and then also a couple thoughts in general. So I guess I'll start off with the questions first, which I think have kind of been echoed before, but I think it'd be good to get a little bit more clarity from your earlier comments around what kind of single-family homes are planned to be built within that Area 1 and Area 2 of the development. I think you'd mentioned kind of briefly just in the house designs that it was going to be more one-story homes, which I think is a little bit more aligned with what we were told as well when we bought our property. And then the other thing along the same lines there as well would be helpful. I don't think within the design plans where you showed some of the house models, there was anything that illustrated what maybe some of the multifamily would look like. I know it was mentioned that there's a limitation on this 2-story there, but I think it'd just be helpful for transparency's sake, just to get like a visual of, okay, like what are we gonna look at? What does it look like? Because I think naturally when we hear multifamily, it sounds maybe a lot scarier than it might be in reality. Because I think all of us envision kind of your 4 or 5-story homes, endlessly long, which you maybe don't want necessarily in your neighborhood from a density standpoint. And then the other thing that I know has been brought up a couple times before as well, so I'll keep it brief on that, but just getting a better understanding of what the phasing looks like, both from a geography standpoint as well as the timing standpoint, I think would be helpful, just so we know, like 15 years or 20 years, as we're talking about kind of how long this might take, is obviously a long period of time. So just getting a better sense, even roughly, what that might look like, I think would be really beneficial for current residents. Then the second to last thing I wanted to touch on is in the presentation from the transportation department. I didn't see anything along Idaho, like on that junction between Penrose and Idaho, around maybe a traffic light or something like that. I think based on the fact that from Syringa you can only turn right on Prairie, and the fact that Idaho is probably your closest point to get onto I-90, I would anticipate a lot of traffic coming out of the neighborhood onto Penrose and then Idaho. And then there's a park, as Mr. Schneidmiller mentioned, right across from Idaho as well, from the North Place West development. So I see a lot of kids coming in and out from that neighborhood. They recently installed like those flashing lights you can hit to crosswalk, but maybe just a thought to think about installing a light there, or finding some other solution, I think, to make it safe for a neighborhood on both sides with North Place West and East, that children can cross both ways, especially with a new park as well in the East neighborhood. And then one last thing I wanted to mention as well, and maybe just a solution. And I know I'm obviously not involved in these processes normally, but we talked a lot about the commercial, and I think a lot of residents had thoughts about the commercial being designated in multiple locations, but it sounded like Mr. Schneidmiller was kind of focused on that one area right by the park. So maybe just a thought to alter kind of the proposal a little bit to just have that commercial designation in that one location rather than maintaining those 3-4 different spots, because it seems to be aligned with what's planned anyways, and it seems to be in the best interest of everybody else as well. And I see my time's up, so thank you.
Cool.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. You got another one?
Yes.
One more? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right, wishing to speak neutral, Neil Urig. And if there's anybody else wishing to speak, this last one that I've got, speak now, or forever hold your peace, come up to, we're out of comment pieces of paper, but we can get you.
Good evening. My name's Neil Urig. I live at 5387 West Gumwood Circle in Post Falls. I am the chairman of the Post Falls School Board. I'm here tonight, and I say neutral, but I'm here to express frustration of how this occurred, the lack of communication from the city. And we're going to be having a meeting with the city about this, but I've heard a lot of people ask why. Why are we neutral? Because we're always neutral. Are we going to change that? We're probably going to have to change that down the road because this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable. What I'm asking for is leadership from the city, work with the school district to prevent this type of development without working with us. We have not seen that. We need that to change. We're here on behalf of the students. It's very, very difficult to build schools in Idaho. We have to pass them on. It is really hard right now in the political climate. So we're neutral, but I'm telling you right now, we're not happy with how this was handled. Thank you.
Hold on. So what's the capacity then at Post Falls right now?
The capacity right now, we're sitting at a population of around 6,000 students. So we do have some vacancies. We could probably fit some more students in the district, but the issue that we have is we can't predict what's going to happen from year to year. Ever since COVID, we've been having these dips going on with our enrollment. So it's very difficult for us to make those type of estimations. The problem with the city not working with us on these type of issues is that we can't adequately plan. The development gets there, but then we have to find a way to build this school. We don't get any of the impact fees. The city is talking about in one of the criteria, impact fees, and we don't get any of that to alleviate the impact on the district. We have a plan, and we're really appreciative that Schneidmiller has come to the table and they're willing to work with us, but what I'm saying right now is that the city needs to come and be part of this with us.
Are any schools in the process of being built, new schools?
Not right now.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other public comment? Okay. Invite the applicant up for a rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, I really won't classify this as a rebuttal. I'll try to answer many of the questions that were brought up, and these may not be in the order of the speakers, but I'll start with one about utilities, and that gentleman spoke about, do we have enough capacity and so forth. All we can do is listen to the utility providers, and they tell us they do. One thing that we do as a company, and we build in the Spokane area as well, I think that gentleman actually came from Washington, so he knows they have much more stringent requirements over there as far as energy efficient homes. And so we are building our homes over here the same way that we build them in Washington. The one thing that we don't do here, Washington has now moved to you're required to put solar panels on a home. we offer them if the homeowner wants to put them on. That's the best that I can address that one. There were a lot of comments about the 55-plus community and the multifamily component. A vast majority of it, as you can see, is single-family detached. There is a multifamily component that was shown at the time of the zone change and the bubble map. We don't even at this point know how many units. We can probably get on what's shown there about 60 or 70 units maximum. It may end up being 20 units. It's going to be market driven. As I said before, again, what we find is there's a component of the 55-plus community that no longer desires home ownership for whatever their reason is, and so we offer that. Again, we agreed at the zone change to limit ourselves to 2-story multifamily throughout the project, and we're going to do that. They are in very, very many ways, they're similar to some of the townhome examples I showed you. We believe in doing smaller buildings, 8 to 10 to 12 units in a building, not massive sized buildings. And that if we do any multifamily and there's a demand, that's what you would see. The first phase will be all single family detached. And as I stated during my presentation, it'll be east of Heaton Avenue, and that's the north-south road that enters off of Penrose. All of these single-family detached homes will be 1-story homes. Obviously, as you can understand, again, the 55-plus community is not interested in a lot of stairs. We do offer sometimes a basement if they do want some additional space below that. So we believe, we were transparent at the zone change in the bubble map, and I appreciate what some of the comments were. Obviously, that is much more generic than what you see here, but we have adhered to that from the standpoint of the uses you see in this much more detailed plan lays that out based on that bubble map. The comment about the parks, and I will have to look, the lady that mentioned the sign, I will check tomorrow to see. That must be a sign that recently went up. And if it is in the location you're describing, it's definitely in the wrong location. So I will make sure that the marketing team takes care of that. We cannot control what realtors might tell you as buyers, unfortunately. If we could, we would certainly do that. So what might have been described, I have no idea what that was. But this has always generally been the plan ever since we started into the process of the zone change over 3 years ago, was to have that area, again, east of Syringa, north of Penrose, west of Syringa, north of Penrose, east of Idaho, and south of Prairie, to be a 55-plus community. And that is fully our intention to do and to execute that. That will, I think Commissioner Wilhelm asked me about the unit count, again, 250 to 300 units. Our experiences showed in other projects like this that we've done, we usually are built around 25 units a year. So you're looking at, again, a 10-plus year build out, even in the gated community. Regarding the parks in general and open space, we're required by the mixed-use code to respond with 7% minimum open space. We're required to do that. And as I stated in my presentation, we have slightly exceeded that. I really can't speak to the roundabout and the railroad track. We have an experience with a railroad. It was actually the Burlington Northern through our Montrose project. So we have experience with, what kind of challenges that can create. But I can't speak to that. I think Mr. Paulus probably spoke to that very well and the plans going forward. So again, we're committed We've already provided the right-of-way, and we're committed to building additional lanes on the south side of Prairie Avenue adjacent to the property, as well as Idaho. We've already, from the Fieldstone subdivision to Penrose, we've already made those improvements adjacent to the current subdivision. And as we continue to build north, we will continue to make those improvements. So I think, I'm more than happy, Mr. Chairman, if I missed something that somebody would like answered.
One other thing I was going to bring, could you briefly talk about emergency vehicles in and out of the neighborhood and how that goes as you develop this with your other developments? You know, how the fire department, you work with them?
Yeah,
obviously.
again, the International Fire Code is very specific about what their requirements are. And I believe Mr. Manley or Mr. Paulett mentioned during their presentation that every time we do a subdivision, when we did, a lot of these folks live on Percival. So when we did that, the fire department weighs in on the amount of ingress and egress is required. And the International Fire Code speaks to the number of lots that can be developed before you have to add additional spaces. Clearly here, there are, from a standpoint of connections to Idaho and Prairie, there's some limits that are out of our control. So you know, Idaho, I've already had discussions with Mr. Paulett about an additional ingress, egress north of Penrose, some distance, kind of in the multifamily area. And I think while we didn't arrive at any final decision, I think the discussion was pretty favorable, if I remember right, Rob. The issue we have on Idaho is somewhat similar. You finally reach a point as you're going north where the grade becomes very steep, but we have the opportunity to do one prior to dropping down towards Prairie that I think would actually align with a street in the subdivision to the west. So we're very open to that, and like I said, we've had, when we were kind of developing this, we had some discussions about that. We're very much in favor of more ingress, egress, where it's allowed. Mr. Paulus mentioned Hope Avenue joining the subdivision to the east, and we've made that connection into ours, so that's a connection. We wouldn't be opposed to additional ones on Prairie. We just understand we're not going to get those, so. Okay? Again, Mr. Chairman, if I missed any and they want me to answer, I'm more than happy.
No, I think, ladies and gentlemen, no, everybody had their time.
I think one question that we heard that hasn't been addressed was, can you more clearly define where the 55 and up is going to be? Like, is there a specific designated area in this that's only going to be 55 plus, or is this whole thing 55 plus? I'm not sure that question was answered. And then can you also address, if you have it, an idea of how this will phase?
Sure.
Like the projection of how this will phase out.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Walton, because that was. So again, the phasing, generally, as I said in my presentation, it will likely be two-pronged because of the 55-plus neighborhood, because that is a separate development because it has a separate demographic that's buying in there versus the general area. So generally, we will continue east from the existing approved subdivision, okay, towards Syringa and continuing east. And then at some point, we may go up and do, like I said, an area around the park so we can perfect those roads and be able to build the park. And then in the 55 plus, the first phase will be east of Heaton Avenue, again, which is a north-south, and it'll be 35 or 40 lots. Each of the subdivisions are approximately that much. Market has a bearing on that. So sometimes it may get a little bit slower than that. Sometimes it may get a little bit faster than that. But generally, we've been doing this for over 40 years. So generally, our phases, it's a philosophy of our company. We're not going to do 100 lots phases. So generally, they're going to be 30 to maybe up to 50. Normally, in a project that's new, and the people that live on Percival, they know that, the first phase there was 64 lots. Likely in the gated community, the 55 plus, it will likely be in the 40, a little bit higher, because that way you get some energy created in the project. It also helps support the amenities that you're building, so.
So am I clear to understand the 55 plus would be north of Penrose, east of Heaton?
East of Idaho, north of Penrose, and west of Syringa,
East of Idaho.
and south
west
of Prairie.
Syringa, south of Perry. So that's a large area.
It is a large area.
Okay.
Yeah, it's roughly a third of the project.
Okay.
So.
So the multifamily along Idaho is some of that 55 and over, and some of that is
No, it's
just
all 55 and over.
all of
Yeah.
that
Whatever
multifamily-
multifamily gets built there will be all 55.
Okay, thank you.
Along Idaho.
All of it?
Along Idaho, yes.
All of it along Idaho will be 55 and over. Yeah. So currently, the only non-55 and over multifamily we have is along, up there, east of Syringa, south of Prairie, where you see those 5 large lots. And again, currently, we're not going to build any multifamily there until we get a decision from the school district. And if we work an agreement out with them, that's where the elementary school will be located. The multifamily will go away. So.
All right, thank you.
Okay?
Chairman, the staff would like to respond to some of the things that the school district brought up just briefly in
Sure.
rebuttal.
Yeah.
We have our
right, Mr.
community
Seal.
development.
Bob Seal, Community Development Director for the city. I just wanted to kind of comment briefly on Mr. Urig's mentioning of working with the city. I regularly do meet with the superintendent of schools. We meet every 6 months in a sit-down meeting with the city administrator. I also sit on the board, the chamber board, with Dina, so I often speak with her there. We do try and keep them well informed as to the developments that are happening or occurring within the city. We have brought them and brought up these issues for the potential need for additional land with developers and or landowners when they do look to come into the city. As Kevin noted, it was the school was informed 4 years ago when this came through, or 3.5 years ago, when this came through for a zone change, that this would be going here. So when this came forward as a subdivision, it did not jump to my attention or our attention as a city to go and let Dina know about this, the potential impact for this, because they had been informed and had commented and had worked through that process previously. We also did work with the school a handful of years ago, not many. The school bought approximately 80 acres of land way up on the prairie, middle of nowhere basically, and we traded them 70 acres for that 80 acres immediately adjacent to other developments in order to provide sooner service so that they could develop that into a future school site at a much earlier date than they could have developed the other parcel. So we do try and work with them throughout this process, and I do look forward to having further meetings, and I'm happy to meet with the board in addition to just working with the superintendent. So anyways, just want to let you know, we do try and coordinate a lot of information and these processes, so thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we'll close out the hearing. Go into our review criteria first.
Can I ask Rob a question?
Let's get through this first.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the commission. What's before you tonight is consideration of the North Place East subdivision approval, number 23-7. The commission is here to review whether or not the proposal meets the subdivision review criteria as codified in the Post Falls Municipal Code. The first criteria is whether a definite provision has been made for a water supply system that is adequate in terms of quantity and quality for the type of the subdivision proposed.
Well, both Post Falls and Ross Point has said that there's a sufficient water supply.
Yeah, there's will serve letter in the packet and staff report.
Thank you. Number 2, adequate provisions have been made for a public sewage system that the existing municipal system and that the existing municipal system can accommodate the proposed sewer flows.
City sewer.
Yeah.
Number 3, whether the proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan.
They might be consistent, but I still don't see it at Idaho and Prairie, where that roundabout is, the train. That's about 100 feet, 150 feet from there, 200 feet maybe. That's my big issue there. I've been stuck there myself. Just like the lady explained in the audience about looking behind you, think you're gonna get hit in the rear.
I'll add to that, just this development will bring, you got Prairie, you got a trail map for the development, Syringa, Penrose. I think it is consistent as far as those items go. How it really builds out is another story, though.
I agree with that.
Well, and it's not an immediate impact.
True.
It's a long project.
It's a long-term project, yeah.
So the finding is generally some discussion as to whether or not they are consistent. Sounds like there's a little bit of a disagreement from Commissioner Wilhelm as to the off-site requirements there on the corner by the railroad. And certainly the volume is a concern that I'm hearing.
Would that be part of our, because it's proposed streets, so we're talking about the streets inside this subdivision?
Yes.
Correct.
And whether it fits generally within the transportation elements of the comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So both an interior look and a holistic view as well. That's the way I would characterize that element.
Okay.
Well, as Mr. Pullis presented, there are, the arterials there are technically equipped to handle the traffic, right? I mean, from a traffic study standpoint, I guess they are. Now, whether I would agree that sometimes you go down those roads and it's ridiculous. So, does it always appear to meet the requirements? I don't know. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm not the city engineer, so I guess I'm going to take his word for it on this.
Thank you, Commissioners. Number 4. Whether all areas of the proposed subdivision which could involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified and that the proposed uses of these areas are compatible with such conditions.
None.
Yeah, nothing was noted yet.
None were found.
There were no comments indicating anything to the contrary. Number 5, the area proposed for the subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, and the use conforms to the other requirements found in this code.
Yes, it's zoned
Yep.
for it.
Sure does.
Yeah, this was R1. It went through the whole public hearing process. I think, would you say 2001 to residential mix, and that went through planning and zoning and city council at that time, so.
Thank you. Finally, number 6, the developer has made adequate plans to ensure that the community will bear no more than its fair share of the cost to provide services by paying fees, furnishing land, or providing other mitigation measures for off-site impacts to streets, parks, and other public facilities within the community.
Impact fees cover some of that, like we heard the schools obviously don't get any of that, so that is a concern. It sounds like the developer is trying to work with the school district to possibly, and which would actually be great, because a lot of the issue here is with high-density multifamily or apartments, as we all know them as, and it sounds like if the school if they did work out a deal, that would be the place that the school would take the land, and that, that high density would be eliminated there. And then it sounds like the other high density is just for the 55 and over, which I think that was a big concern with people was that just going to be a sea of apartments? And it's looking a little bit different when you know it's a part of the 55 and over community. You're probably not going to have even a lot of multi-story, I would think. But.
I agree.
I'll just add that, as this is built out, the developer will pay the impact fees for the streets, the parks, public safety, which is police, and then there's fire and EMS impact fees now too. Unfortunately, the way Idaho laws are, there's no school impact fees. At this time, we have to work on that other ways, but they will mitigate what they can mitigate through those impact fees.
The fire and the EMS do get, their new impact fees are big though. And they, I believe, are relying on development and impact fees to improve their capital equipment and make improvements. And though the school doesn't get an impact fee, with a 55 and older community, those residents are still paying levies, and they're paying levy fees, though they don't likely have kids, school-age kids. And so I think that it's a 55 and over community probably has a positive economic impact on the schools because they pay the fees, but they don't utilize the facilities.
Thank you.
All right.
Commissioners, once you get into the deliberation, I want to correct one earlier part of this. You had asked previously of the developer as to whether or not he would agree to a restriction on the commercial use to a single story. I would not recommend we put that as a condition of the approval. The zoning already restricts that, and that's not the type of condition that we would have in a subdivision approval. That would be different if we were dealing with a special use permit or something else to that effect, but I do not recommend including that. It doesn't sound like it was an issue, as he was in favor of it anyway. But just to touch back on that point.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Can I ask a question of Rob?
We've already closed the hearing, so.
Okay.
If we do that, we could open up the public comment, and then everyone gets to respond to that limited area. But
Okay. Well, let's go one by one, and what does everybody think? Nancy, you want to start?
I have one thing that I might say first.
Yes.
And that's that I'm normally not compelled by residents of prior developments opposing the next phase of the development. However, in this case, there were a lot of folks and a large concentration of people that are customers living in, I'm not sure the name of it, but the development south of Penrose Avenue there. And I think that maybe we might consider a condition that the lots immediately to the north of Penrose, west of Prairie, not be utilized for multifamily.
Say that again, please. The lots, which lots?
North of Penrose.
So the multifamilies there?
Well, would effectively
in
be
Idaho?
a buffer, a multifamily buffer there, for the folks that are living south of Penrose in the existing development.
So that just one, like those parcels immediately on the other side?
The
is
one
what you're saying,
parcel
the one-
immediately on the other side.
Okay, okay, I see what you're saying.
Like it could be green space.
Oh,
Or
lot-
it could be single family.
the lots, lot number 7 that's right there. Is that what you're talking about?
I expect that the developer would probably be open to that.
You're talking about one of the parcels.
Southern parcel.
Just one of them.
I'd say a I don't know, maybe 30% of the people in here, that was their concern, that their realtors had told them that wouldn't be a multi-story
Right, apartment.
facility right there, so that would probably be something that the developer would do, and we could condition it in.
Make it a condition.
Other comments? Nancy, what do you think?
I like Ross's idea, actually. I think it's a good one. I think as it comes out, it doesn't appear to me that there's going to be nearly as much space that could have apartments on it as originally it might have looked like. And I think that's going to make, that's going to ease a lot of people's minds. I do understand that some of these lots are really small, but I also think that's kind of a way that we can have housing that's a little bit more affordable, but still homeowner occupied. When we make the lots a little smaller, it reduces the cost. So I wouldn't want them all to be tiny, but I kind of like that there is a mix of townhouses and a little bit smaller lot sizes so that we can actually get maybe more diversity of housing options.
I think where you come in there, if I'm trying to visualize it, when you come in off of Idaho, I think it's a wide road, and there's quite a green space before the houses actually start.
I believe it has a median in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So along those immediate ones, because you can tell by looking at it, there's quite an area there before, at the entrance there,
believe
before
you're
the
right, yeah.
houses. Between where the street and the houses, because there's a big green space in there and everything.
On Penrose,
Huh?
I think
Yes,
she's talking
coming
about
in
right
off
here.
of Idaho.
Right here, as it comes in, isn't that's off Idaho?
Yeah.
This is what's already built, so I think that's what
Yeah.
she's talking about, in this space, kind of
Yeah,
right
there
in
is.
here, there's a big, yeah.
Anything else, Nancy?
No, that's it.
Ross, did you have anything more? Bobby?
Prairie, when would that, my understanding that the developer has to widen that, when would that happen in all these phases? Does that start right off the bat?
No, it would.
No.
It would be when there's development up against Prairie.
So it doesn't happen until 15, 20 years from now,
Just depends on the development.
however long it takes the development.
And I
Well,
think,
as Mr. Paul has stated, and we concur with that any time. we
Commission,
develop-
sorry, we can't have the back and forth without
Yeah.
opening the public hearing.
yeah, we can't.
Ask the applicant to,
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I believe, and this was already said, Rob talked about the annexing of Prairie, so obviously there's lots of stuff that could happen between now and then.
Right.
My understanding, and just been doing this for the couple of years, is as the development gets up there, they'll start working on Prairie. That's what other development's done. Who knows what happens with the city annexes in? They get the capital improvement project to work on it sooner.
Yeah, I missed that part, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I like the thing of not piecemealed in. 20 acres here, 15 acres or whatever, where it's one big plan. I have concerns like some of the other people that spoke up here about the multifamily thing. But what I do like is the multifamily for the 55 and older. Every single week, somebody asks me for an apartment, and it's bad out there. I'm concerned, and I've seen the projects I think that this company does, and they've turned out nice. I do believe it'll take a little bit to get to that Prairie. I'm concerned about that track, obviously, that railroad track. And there was a lot of people opposed to this, more houses and stuff. Well, if you don't get any more houses in here, the prices of the current ones keep going up, up. We've all seen it the last 5 years. Mine went up $1 million, what it's worth. So the people that try to get into some starter homes, they're out. If there's no housing being built, they're out. The school is a big issue. That's beyond this, this forum right here. They have to try to get those bonds or whatever, and they get shot down all the time. This is a really hard decision, because that's a lot of houses right there on that corner. And we need houses, and that traffic, it's a tough one.
Vicky Joe?
And I do agree with Ross on the,
I think we all have concerns on the traffic, but I also am looking that it is a long-range project. It's not going to be tomorrow we're going to have another 3,000 or 5,000 vehicles. It's going to develop one way or the other, and I think this is a good plan for it. I like to see the 55 and over, and we do need apartments and like a duplex type of a thing or cottage homes. We need those for the people to get first-time home buyers to be able to get a property. And so I like that the development is a mix of everything. We have a city park, we have open spaces. I'm not sure on the commercial part of it, but I mean, it sounds kind of cool to be able to walk a block down to the coffee shop, I guess, sometimes. So that could be good. I'm kind of up in the air about that. But I think overall, it's kind of covered everything it needed to cover, and it's a large development, but I think it's a good use of the land there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the mixed residential is a great plan for the reasons already stated. We need houses, we need affordable housing. And this seems to be a good mixed-use plan to bring some of that in. Concerns about traffic, I think we see development pays impact fees, and the way it is that's the way it is. The roads will follow once the development comes. And so the development has to come first, and then the roads are going to get fixed and built out. And I think we have to trust our city engineers, and we have to trust their data and hope that the information that we're given is accurate and correct, and trust their guidance as we navigate through the phases of this project.
What I'll say is, with the residential mix, the reason that zoning came about is to have the diversity of houses. So you can have apartments, 50 plus, the smaller lots, a little bit bigger lots, R1, things like that. The neighborhood commercial, I forget where those pictures are from, but I know we've ridden our bike through that area. That's kind of a cool little thing in there. I'm not sure how that'll work out. Park is good. Another thing that I keep in mind, you know, at the surface, this looks, it's huge, and it is huge. But for us, we have to keep in mind that this is going to be a 10, 15, 20-year plan. I bought in a house at a development in the city 12 years ago now, and I was one of the first 10 houses in there, and it definitely did not develop like it was supposed to develop. The park didn't come in. I was told, real estate agent, park was coming next year. It came 5 years. A lot of things change, plans change. You know, be interesting to see what this does, but I think this does give us the diversity of the house. Obviously, there's traffic issues. The school's an issue. That's been a constant concern. I have a middle schooler and now a high schooler, so be dealing with that and talking about that for the time being. But as this develops, we get the impact fees, and that helps for better parks, streets, public safety, and the fire and EMS. So I think I just look at this as it's going to definitely be phased in. I think it's hard to say which phases are going to go in. I think he has an idea, but then 5 years from now, it could be totally different. So, any other comments?
are we gonna
Include the condition
his?
or
Whoever
recommendation?
would
How do
like
we-
to make a motion for or against, if it's going to be for, you can include that condition. If it's against, it probably doesn't.
Which one? So would the condition kind of look like then that So there'd be 1 through 13, which are already in our packet here. And then number 14 be that there would be no high-density multifamily built on the parcel that's currently identified as number 7. I mean, is that a
Within
way
our
to
staff
identify it?
I think as long as you identify it enough that somebody can look at it, so within the, track 7 off of Idaho, north of Penrose, in the staff report.
I'm just kind of asking, would you
Yeah.
like a
Can
better
we do that?
identification than that? Than number
I don't
7?
think-
I mean, that just sounded easy, but it could be.
Commission, we have a current development zoning agreement in which the city already entered into with the applicant when they rezoned the project. Basically, one of the conditions of that development agreement was that the owner agrees that the development of the property will conform with that bubble plan, right? The cloud-looking plan that was attached earlier, which depicts the general disposition of uses and the infrastructure on the property. So we have granted them the freedom previously with the previous zoning amendments to develop as within those bubbles as they see fit. I don't see the restriction on Lot 7 adjacent to that street as being inconsistent with that, since there were a number of options in that bubble that was previously agreed to. However, the applicant may feel that that is something that they can't live with, and then they would have to either appeal the decision or anything else. So if that recommendation or that restriction on Lot 7 is consistent with the previous zoning agreement, then sure. It's basically taking one of the sticks out of his bundle, which he has already previously gotten approval for from the zoning.
It's approved for multifamily right now, correct?
Single-family attached, single-family detached, and multifamily, I believe, is what's in that bubble.
Okay.
One question I do have for the attorney, and for commission, for your goal on this, would a green tract, would a tract that's open space providing distance, does that meet your needs too? Or is it a use thing?
I'm just kind of taking what we heard in testimony and their concerns that, hey, we don't want an apartment right there because we were told there is not going to be an apartment right there. And so that's what I was kind of trying
So you're
to,
getting
and
at
I
a use.
understand that,
You're getting at a use functionality.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
looking at a use function. I think that's where the concern was. So that's kind of what I was.
So are you saying that we could put in that and it could be appealed, is what you're saying? We can do that today, but they could appeal it.
I wouldn't recommend putting in conditions that are inconsistent with the positions we've already taken. And since I wasn't here when the original development agreement was done a couple years ago, I'm not sure that's consistent with what has already been approved. And again, the criteria tonight is whether or not the application meets the subdivision approval criteria. And restricting the uses on that lot, how that falls into the 6 criteria that we're considering tonight for the approval, which are generally, I'm getting the nods, that they have met the criteria for water, sewer, streets. All areas of the proposed subdivision meet the topographical conditions. The area proposed for the subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, which it is. And the developer has made adequate plans to ensure the community that nobody bears more than their fair share of the costs. So how we tie this condition of restrictions on that lot, which was previously already agreed to, into one of these conditions is where I'm having the struggle.
Gotcha.
Saying it wouldn't have any teeth, it just probably wouldn't. Okay.
If the applicant were to agree to that, and again, you'd just be pulling one of his sticks out of the bundle, so then he'd be limited to the remaining two bubbles, I suppose, on the previous bubble map.
Why don't we open the hearing back up and ask him what he thinks?
Well, or if the commission wants to think about this, you can continue the public hearing, you can enter more dialogue onto it, but we've heard quite a bit of testimony on this issue already tonight.
Yeah, if we're gonna open it back up, can we get a break?
If we open it back up, he's allowed to talk, and then public comment also.
Yes, yeah.
So the public-
I would prefer not to open it back up, but
Okay.
That's
So,
me.
like I said, I'm reticent to putting conditions on things that are contrary to what was previously allowed. There are entitlements that have appended to the property, and we're looking at whether or not the subdivision meets the city's criteria.
Right.
Straying too far aside of that, one way or the other, is where you get into the challengeable area. I'm sorry if I can't provide you more direction.
No, that's fine.
Well, we've made our concerns known.
Yeah, at the very least, we've made the concerns known, our concerns, and the residents of the area too. So, all that being said, does anybody like to make a motion one way or the other?
Well, I'll make a motion. I think I'm gonna add the 14, but, so, if you guys don't like it, I'll find out. I move to approve North Place East subdivision, file number SUBD-23-7, finding that it meets the approval criteria and the Post Falls Municipal Code as outlined in our deliberations, subject to conditions 1 through 13 contained in the staff report, and adding a condition number 14 that no high-density multifamily be built on what's identified as parcel number 7. And direct staff to prepare a written decision.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
And maybe add the corner of Idaho and Penrose, lot 7.
Okay, so in number 14, you want to say that no high-density multifamily be built on parcel number 7, which is on the corner of Penrose and Idaho?
Yeah. I'd second it.
So just for clarification, so we got the little track A part right there and lot 7.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I think it's clear enough.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Stephenson,
Yes.
Walton,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Wilhelm,
Yes.
Ampe,
Yes.
Schotthauer.
Yes.
Whoops.
All righty. Next item on the agenda is administrative and staff reports.
There's none.
None. Commissioner comments?
Thank you for the cake.
Yep.
I'm heading to it.
All right. Next item is adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Move to
All right.
adjourn.
Adjourned.